Hi folks, and welcome to Calling BS here on Shaw TV's Community Creations. We of course are the cutting edgiest sports talk show there is around here, and what we do every single week is we talk about 3 topics and we run it down with a 4-minute timer each topic, and when that timer is done we finish talking about it, period. And so the 3 topics for today are a look forward to the Washington Capitals offseason, their big GM signing and or promotion, I suppose, and their big coach signing. We're going to talk about the most important horse race in the last 35 years as California Chrome goes for the Belmont, and we are going to talk about the hottest team in baseball, the Toronto Blue Jays. Now, let's get started with the first 4 minutes. Of course, Sean, the Capitals made a pretty big splash so far, the biggest splash I would say so far this offseason, signing Barry Trotz, as well as making a GM promotion. Of course, Barry Trotz, the second, when he was with the Predators, was the second longest running coach in professional sports behind Greg Popovich of the Spurs. Now, what do you think of that?
I like that move. What I would have said about the Capitals the last couple of years is that they need to rebuild, but I'm willing to have kind of a wait-and-see attitude now. I'd like to see what they do under Barry Trotz. Maybe he's the guy to get them over the hump in the playoffs. I mean, time will tell. But, yeah, you know, he's the best coach out there in terms of free agents, if you want to call it that. I thought that was a good pickup. Yeah, I'm interested to see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily agree that the Caps need a full rebuild. They still do have pieces there, obviously, but I do agree that in order to make it back to the playoffs, and their game wasn't exactly tailored to the playoffs, they need to get more defense out of their stars, and I think Trotz can do that, having coached a West game for 15 years, essentially. So I think this is a very important move for the Washington Capitals. Now, do you think there have been rumors floating around about Alex Ovechkin taking off for the KHL? Not this year, but maybe next year, to ensure that he has enough time there for when the Olympics roll around again. Do you think it's worth enticing Ovi to stay?
I'm sure Barry Trotz will do his best. He's going to sit down with Ovi, you know, kind of pick his brain a little bit. Trotz still wants to coach an offensive game. He's not going to change the Capital style of play. He coached a more defensive style in Nashville. He's not going to do that in Washington. And Ted Leonsis, too, has said he's not going to rebuild that team. That is not an option right now, apparently, after bringing Trotz in. So I know there are always rumors about Russian players going to the KHL. I think Ovi sticks it out. Yeah,
I think you're probably right. Now, in regard to a rebuild, I think he's right, though. I don't really think it is an option for them to rebuild. You've got a perennial 50-goal scorer. Now, he can't play defense or has no interest in playing defense, but still, you're not going to go out and pay the type of money to how many ever players you want to inside of his salary and get 50-goal scorers. It's just not going to happen. You know, he's a one-of-a-kind player. Now, whether or not you like that one-of-a-kind or not is a different story. But he does score 50 goals a season, and I mean they do have some young players in that mix that are good and that can add offense or defense. I really like Braden Holtby. I think he's a terrific goaltender. He just needs a little bit of grooming and tweaking going forward. He's still very young as well, so he can mature into his game. Now, in regards to rebuild that you seem to think was necessary before these 2 moves, what would you have done? Like what possible moves could you have made to rebuild that team?
Well, see, I'm more about playoff success and regular season success.
You got to get there too.
Oh, for sure. Well, look at the Los Angeles Kings. They're not exactly, you know, high flyers in the regular season, but they play when it counts the most.
They do get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Washington didn't get there with the guys that they had this year. And plus, they haven't exactly had the kind of success in the playoffs that teams need. If you look at the last few years, 2010, they won the President's Trophy, went out in the first round. The next year, they were first in the East, got swept in the second round. Last year, 2013, against the Rangers, they had a 2-0 series lead. And they lost that in the first round in 7 games.
Ovi just disappeared, though.
Yeah.
Like, that was, I think, the biggest problem for them was that Ovi just absolutely disappeared.
That's kind of my point. That's the problem with him, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not something that you're going to see happen from him often, but it does happen. Yeah. Now, moving on to the next topic, of course, the most important horse race in the last half a decade, maybe, or sorry, not half a decade, half a century maybe,
right.
as California Chrome chases the Triple Crown this weekend at the Belmont Stakes. Now, California Chrome, of course, from California, trained by the Shermans, Art and Allen, with Victor Espinoza as the jockey. Remember, of course, he has been here already. He's done this with War Emblem in 2002, where he won the first 2 races. He won the Derby and the Preakness, but couldn't quite bring out the best of Emblem at the longer Belmont Stakes. Affirmed, of course, the last horse to win it in 1978, 36 years ago. Most famous horse, Secretariat, of course, also in the 70s. Chrome had a pretty solid running in the first 2 races, winning the Derby by a length and 3/4, winning the Preakness by a length and a half, drew the number 2 post position at Belmont. And Espinoza has been on record multiple times saying that he has yet to reach the bottom of the horse, meaning that he feels like he hasn't hit that gas tank yet.
Right.
There's still more for this horse to give. And I think that's really important because he's in the 2 post position, which means he's going to have the rail, or at least get there quick. If he can get out to an early lead, he's a fast starter, and he pulls away from other horses. It forces closers to have to close early, and it forces horses like himself, leaders, to try and jump out to catch him. And if this horse has more in the tank than Espinoza thinks, then I see Chrome easily winning the Belmont. Of course, experts predicting that he won't. It is, of course, an 11-horse race, Chrome being the 11th horse in there. I think this is maybe the most important horse race of all time.
Yeah, I might agree with you on that. I think Chrome will do it. 3 to 5 odds. Those are the latest odds for California Chrome. The next closest one is Wicked Strong at 6 to 1. I would agree with you. Certainly one of the most, if not the most important horse race in history. And yeah, I think Chrome will do it. You know, I'm not really a horse racing type of guy, quite honestly, as much as you might be. But even I'm interested in this. I'm just a casual sports fan, and I'm very much interested in this. I'm going to tune into it.
Yeah, I mean, there have been 12 horses since affirmed who have won the first 2 legs of the Triple Crown, but none of them, of course, Chrome being the 13th one to do it, none of them have really felt as real, except for I'll Have Another in 2012, but I'll Have Another, of course, scratched before the Belmont Stakes with an undisclosed injury. Chrome feels like the absolute realest shot since affirmed in 78 to do it, and I think it's been the longest dry spell in horse racing history. Whether or not you want to call it a sport or not, I guess that would be an interesting conversation about what makes an athlete and whether or not a horse is an athlete.
Right. It's a sport for the horse, right?
Right. I mean, obviously, right. So, but I think this is incredibly important because the horse racing has been on a huge downturn because it's been so long and people are not interested in horse racing as much as they were in the 70s that saw 3 Triple Crown winners. So I think if Chrome manages to pull this out, of course, the horse will be worth $1 billion should he win the Belmont Stakes, which is an absurd amount for a horse, or I guess at least that's what the estimates say. So yeah, I think this is a crucially important moment, and if Chrome does win this race, I expect to see a huge boom in horse racing interest around the globe. I actually would put money on saying that more people watch the Belmont Stakes than Game 2 of the NBA Finals. Moving on to our final topic, of course, we are both baseball fans. I, of course, am a Jays fan. And they have been the hottest team in baseball over the course of the month of May. Of course, you have the Player of the Month for the AL, Edwin Encarnacion. I would say the Player of the Month for the entire Major League Baseball, hitting 16 home runs in the month of May, ties him with Mickey Mantle for the record.
That's right.
In the month of May in the American League, which is a very important thing. Yep. You have Mark Burley, who is now 10-1. He has been pitching his mind out, something that neither one of us really saw. They've been getting strong starts. You've got Marcus Stroman, who had a strong first start. The Jays are on a roll. What makes you, what is the cause of this, do you think? Is it just Burley? Is it Encarnacion? Is it Brett Laurie putting on a defensive clinic out there? What is the biggest change this year from last year?
They're healthier, first off. Bautista's healthy, Cabrera's healthy. Last year he was playing with a benign tumor on his spine, which affected his back and affected his legs. And you could tell when he was in the outfield, he was just looking like an old man out there. And he's hitting a lot better this year too. Starting pitching has been better than what it was last year. There were such high expectations last year. I mean, you know what? I'm a huge Josh Johnson fan. I expected so much out of him.
He just didn't show up.
No, and he didn't show up, and his career might even be done now. But yeah, Mark Burley's having a fantastic season. R.A. Dickey got off to a bit of a slow start. His ERA was hovering around 6. It's down to 4.25 now. So that's,
and he's working at it. He's getting better.
He is getting better. Yeah, for sure. Also, too, is just better all-around defense than what they had last year. They were making far too many errors last year. I know Jose Reyes can make some big errors from time to time, but having him healthy at shortstop, though, is very important.
Exactly. He's still a huge defensive upgrade over Munenori Kawasaki or whoever you want to plug in that spot. I agree. I mean, he's hitting well too. I think it's very important. And the catchers have been much better this year than they had been last year.
Anyone is better than J.P. Arencibia.
J.P. Arencibia, who was he was an awful defensive catcher, and the Jays knew that, was only really around for his bat. Couldn't bring his bat to the games last year, it seemed.
No.
Was taking wild swats, was striking out more than anybody else on the team. Of course, you've got Josh Tole, who has been catching for R.A. Dickey, has played 22 games this season, has been impressive behind the plate even. And Deanna Navarro, who's been a step up both defensively and offensively than Arencibia. I think those two things are a huge deal as well. Now, my question is, going forward, do you think the Jays can keep it up? Are they real? Are they a contender? Are they a
I am still a bit skeptical because in past years they've had really hot stretches like this, or they've gotten off to great starts only to fade after the All-Star break. So I'm going to keep my expectations in check right now. It's very exciting, don't get me wrong. Especially last year there were such high expectations, a lot of pressure on that team, and they folded under it. I think because no one was really talking about them as a contender this year, perhaps kind of flying under the radar, maybe that's more how they like it.
Maybe. Yeah. It won't happen now. They've been playing way too well, and but I mean, there's been international media exposure for this Jays team over the last 2-3 weeks, and they obviously haven't buckled. They've been playing stronger than ever. They had a huge win streak. They dominated KC on the weekend. They've been playing great against Detroit. You know, I think they're legit. I don't know if they're necessarily a World Series contender, but I would say they're going to take that AL West title, and I bet you they do it by 4 games.
I hope you're right. There's still more than 100 games to go, so it's a long, long season.
A lot of baseball left to play.
I'd like to see them add another arm, maybe the ace for the Chicago Cubs, Jeff Samardzija.
Yeah, there's been rumors, and I know it's probably, we're out of time. Add one last thing. I heard that David Price is on his way out of Tampa Bay. Now, they're more than likely not going to trade inside the division, but you never know.
Maybe a 3-way somewhere?
Maybe. And so that's it. We are out of time. Of course, we ran a little bit overtime on that last topic. Very worth it, though, for that little bit of news. We want to thank you very much for sticking around with us. Every single week we deliver to you guys because you are what make this show work. This is what makes this show run. We wouldn't be doing it if you guys weren't watching. I want to say thank you very much for Shaw for putting us up here. Of course, Shaw TV's community creation gives us the ability to produce, edit, and put the show out on the air. And I want to thank our one-man wrecking crew behind the camera, Darren Morash. So I'm sure we're going to be around next week as well as this week. So tune into this episode, PVR it. Tune in next episode, PVR it. And until next week, have a good one.
The proceeding was an independently produced community access program. The viewpoints expressed are those of the community access producer and do not reflect those of Shaw Cable Systems. The program is presented in response to CRTC policy guidelines regulating community programming.